Hello and welcome to another Rogue Entity tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at material overlays. We're going to assign a new selected material, so when we select our characters we can assign an overlay rather than an outline. Alright, let's get started by creating our overlay material. So I'm going to go to my materials folder, create a new material. Just going to call it M overlay. I want this to be a translucent material. All other settings are default. Start by adding a color. So I'm just going to hold 3 on the keyboard and click. Gives me a constant color, and I'm going to convert this to a parameter. I'll just call it color. I'll set this to white for default. I'm just going to hold 1 on the keyboard and click to add a constant, and I'm going to promote that to a parameter as well, and I'll call this intensity or glow. I'll just set this to 1 for default, and then I'm going to hold M and click to multiply those two, and that'll give us our emissive color for now. And now we want to apply a texture to this, so I'm going to search for texture sample. For the texture, because I've used the top-down template, there should be this arrow texture. You can use any texture for this, just some sort of shape or whatever is basically what you're going to overlay. So I'm going to use this for the alpha. So if I connect this to the opacity, oh hang on, I might need to set up the UV. Search for texture coordinate. There it is. So that's, eliminating the black, showing the white. Now I'm going to add in here, I just want to add a lerp that disables this color. So it's a parameter, so you could turn it off and on. So I'm gonna duplicate this parameter, and I'll call this active. I'm going to be putting in some parameters that we're not going to really use today, but we'll use them in the future. That's how you want to make your materials. You want to make them as versatile as possible and potentially usable for other things, rather than have multiple materials. Just have a single base and you can make instances of it. So I'm going to put this into the lerp, and that'll basically allow me to change this value here in my material instance to turn it off and on. I'm going to duplicate this color twice more, and I'm going to call this color failed, and this one color success. So you could just have the one color here, but I'm setting this up for later. I'm going to use these colors to show if something's placeable or not, or something like that. I'm just putting generic colors for now, and then I'll create another parameter. Control D to duplicate like that. So then again, we'll lerp between those. So this will allow us to change colors basically with this parameter here. So if it's, let me hook it up first. So if this is disabled, it'll then start using these two colors. So you can then change between red and green, depending on whether it's good or not. So that's those. Neaten this up a bit if I can. Alright, now we want to get into our opacity here. So let's, first of all, let's set up some tiling parameters. So again, I'm just going to duplicate one of these parameters. I'm going to make 2 parameters, and I'll just call them U tiling, V tiling. And I'm going to make a vector 2 out of that, so I'm going to go append vector, and I'm going to hold M and click to multiply that. So I'm going to multiply that with the coordinate. Oops. And then I'm going to put another parameter here just for general scale, just so you can just change the scale overall. And I'll multiply that in as well with that. What we want to do, we probably want to have the ability to change the rotation. So I'm going to add a custom rotator here. So we'll plug our UV into that. Bring this back a bit. Let's hold Alt and click to disconnect stuff, just like you can hold Control and move stuff around. We'll just feed a default into this. So I'm just going to hold 1 and click and put this to, we don't need this to be a parameter, it's just going to be the same all the time, so leave it as a constant. We need a texture rotation parameter. Oh, what did I do with the name of this? That's meant to be scale. So we'll duplicate that, and then we'll make this, what did I say? Texture rotation. Put this to 0.5. And then we'll put that in as the angle. So now, if we feed this in, we should be able to mess with the rotation. Cool. So yeah, I'll have the arrow going down actually. That's good. And then what I want to do is I want to pan it. So we're going to add a panner. 2 parameters for speed, so we can change whether it's going left, right, up or down and change the speed. So 2 more, Control D. And I'll change this to speed X and speed Y. And I'll have to append these. Because you can see the speed is a vector 2 there. Put that in there, and then bring our coordinate through. And we have some sideways scroll action. What's that? Oh, because I got X on. So if I put this to 0, should be straight down. Yep. So there, we can go all, change the speed. So like I can go half speed. I can go full sideways if we want. We can do it all. We have the technology. So let's just neaten that up. The other thing you can do is feed something into time and make it oscillate back and forth or whatever. So have a play with that if you're feeling confident. And let's put this down here. Has to be neat. Has to be neat. I'm just highlighting stuff and pressing Q to align like that. You can also do Shift and your WASD keys to align. So I'll align the left edges here, or I can press Shift A to align the other side like that. Really important for your neatness. If you wanted to do like an outline, so say you had some other texture. What's this? What does this look like? Oh, that's pretty drippy. Need some sort of solid type texture. So we've got let's put this back to white. So we've got like an overlay, which will just overlay on white at the moment, but we can add like sort of more of like an outline setup like we had with our outline if you just want to sort of replicate that. So you can do that with a Fresnel. Probably saying that wrong. It's a weird word. So we can do the amount. Let's copy it. So we can make this the, what should we call this? Let's call it gradient because it's kind of what it's doing. We need to make a default value here. So we're going to need really small. This is sort of how transparent it is. So I'm just going to do 4 zeros and a 1. Put that into there. And then if we multiply this with our opacity, oops, you can see we get that sort of gradient look. We go like, I don't know, 5, too much, 2. Maybe my other texture will show up better. Let's put it back to the arrow. I'll scale it down. Which is actually up, I think, isn't it? Yeah. So that's the arrows, and then this to 1. Seems to be just doing, like it seems to be just doing the overall. It is weaker in the center there. Maybe we need a number. Yeah, this has to be really low. There we go. That's getting a bit better. So, actually this is probably what's affecting it. We need a crazy intensity for something like this. There we go. Now you can see it. Now if we go 5, we can get that edge glow sort of happening. Anyway, we'll probably see that better on the when we do it actually on a character. Just do a tweak in a way once you get all the settings in. I'll leave that in for now. It's not really something I wanted to use for this, but and that is our overlay. So let's create a material instance of that once we save. And create material instance. Just going to name it MI overlay. We can test this straight away without any code, but we'll do the code for it in a sec. But let's just have a look at it. So let's just plonk a character in, and if you go to rendering, advanced, you've got the mesh here, the overlay. If you haven't got it open, it's rendering, advanced, and then mesh, and you'll find this overlay material here, and we should be able to just put in our overlay instance, and then we can see it. And there it is. Materials. I'll pull this out. And you can see like the parameters that we put in before, if I change them, it's fading it in and out. And you can see that's gone to the green now, which is not very good, but yeah, we can, oh no, we changed the scale, didn't we? You can see I can change it to red easily enough. And you just be able to set these to 0 to 1. 0 is like failed and 1 is success. We'll do that in a later video, but if I change, I think this would be a good point to change. Actually, I didn't add the texture sample as a parameter. Might just do that. Texture, I'll just call it texture. And we'll save that. And now we can change our texture here just for this instance. So you can have two instances with different textures. So I mean by reusing the same base material. So you can see how that Fresnel gives that outer glow. Not quite as sharp as like the outline that we had in the other video, but you can see it has the same sort of effect. If I disable this, well, that intensity needs to come down. Yeah, you can, it's a pretty cool effect, and you can, tweak away and get it to where you want it. If you're just looking for like a normal selection sort of glow, something like that, it's gradient that was affecting how we can make this more, so which pushes the center out, so we can make it 6. you get more of that edge. So if you make it a higher number, but then increase the intensity, sort of just get more of an edge glow. Doesn't look that different to what, the other edge glow that we made. It's just a bit wider, I guess. Anyway, let's go back to our arrows. And I want the arrows to be bigger, so let's scale them, which is actually reversed. So yeah, I want some arrows like that. We'll mostly be seeing from this side, so arrows, so that I think it's U is side to side. Yeah, so you can position the arrow, so I want it to be right down the middle of the back. I can line that up like that, which it pretty much already was. A fluke, I think, but anyway, that's good. At the moment I select the character, that's the outline one. You can see it's a lot defined. This method is less resource intensive, especially when you've got a lot of stuff, so just something to keep in mind. But yeah, so we want to make it so when I select it, it shows this overlay material instead. Off the C++ we go. So I'm going to start by making a new data for my character. So I'm going to add a data asset file for it, similar to how we did the formations if you haven't watched that data video. But yeah, so we're just going to make it S character data. It's going to be a primary asset. So in here we're just going to put our reference to the name of or the type of the. Alright, so this will be a reference to what data type will be in the asset manager, and I'll show that later once we get back in the editor. And this is the function that the engine will use to retrieve that value. It's pretty standard for any data asset. From here on will just be whatever data we want to have on our character. So at the moment, I'm just going to have a material instance, which will be that highlight material that we want to use. Let's go to our character class now, whatever character class you're using. I was using the default one. So in here, I'll just put it in here. I'm gonna make just a little data management section here because it'll probably grow. Management. Put a parameter for our asset. I'm going to call it character data asset. Just going to put in a character called data so we can find it easily enough later and assign it. And I'm putting this meta tag because this is what I'm going to call the character data class in the asset manager. It's going to be called character data. So I only want to be able to assign a character data to this. So like I can't accidentally assign a formation data asset to this and cause all sorts of problems. I'm going to set this to replicated because it's probably later on I'll be covering how you can use these data assets to read all the character parameters and stuff. So you might want to do it on clients and the server. So like it's probably a good file to replicate. And then part of that, adding that tag is we have to add the replicated props to this. We'll do that in a sec. So there's a couple other functions I want to add here. It's just sort of general getting the data loaded and ready to use. So we're just going to have a general load data, which will load all our data for our character later on. For now, it'll just be a material, or it'll just be this asset ID actually. And then we'll have a function to retrieve that data asset in a form that we can use, which is back to the actual class, not the primary asset ID file. And then we'll have a function that gets and loads our material from that asset. Let's do all this. I'm just going to put this function in begin play before I forget. This is what will make the asset usable. So it's basically going to load it into memory and say this is where it is and this is where it lives. Do I have a begin play here? I do not. So I'll just put it in. In our load data, we are first going to get a reference to our asset manager. We'll include the asset manager.h, and then we're going to check that our asset is actually valid that we want to use. So this will, in here, we'll probably have a check like this for every data asset we want to load. At the moment, it's only one, so that's fine. And then we're just going to load that asset, tell the asset manager to load it. We'll add the get character data. This is just going to be a function to retrieve the data for that asset, which needs to be loaded before you can do that. So that's why that's on begin play, and this will just be as needed. And then we need a function to get our material. In here, we're going to get the data. We're going to get that highlight material, and it's a soft object pointer, which means it's not loaded into memory until we need it. And then it's when we want to retrieve it, it's going to say, is it loaded? If it's not, load it and then pass it back. It's part of the benefit of the data assets is you can have materials and things in the game that are never loaded until they're needed. And I could actually, if I wanted to, you could do unload when you deselect. So this material will only be loaded in the game when you are using it, and when it's not being used, it's just unloaded. It's not in your memory. At the moment, I'm not unloading anything in this tutorial because it's such a small, like one small material. It's not gonna something to keep in mind when you're building your characters and your assets with lots of materials. It's not always needed. You can save a lot of resources doing it this way. So now we need to update our selected. So I know highlight, isn't it? So this is where we're doing our outline. So I'm just going to remove that for now. Add in the replacement. So the other thing I have to do is I mentioned before that we set the asset ID to be replicated. So we need to add the replicated props in here. Unreal uses macros to build this. So the fact that we've got a replicated value means we can add this without a definition, so that I can just add this function. I don't need to override in the H file. So that's why you'll see this function around all the time without a reference to it in the H files, because it's handled by macros if there's replicated values already in there. So that's replicating our asset ID. If you're not doing multiply, you don't have to worry about this sort of stuff. Alright, so we should be able to go back to the editor now. Right, so I had one build error, and there's a whole bunch of errors, but so you can see it's all the one line. And it's just because I didn't do a include for this, the new character data class in the character file. So I'm just going to add a forward declaration for that, which is added to there. In Rider, they used to come up as red under the line, and now they've just got this tiny little green line. I always miss it. Super annoying. Yeah, just make sure you're going to include a reference to that class, or you can just put class in front of it there. Back in the editor, we need to set up our data assets. So I'm going to come to our data folder, and I'm going to put a new folder here. I'm just going to move these formations to a folder, and I'm going to do one for our characters. Whenever you move or delete stuff like that, it's worth just right clicking on here and go fix up redirectors. Every time you move something in Unreal, it remembers where it was before and saves a redirector. It can get pretty crazy amount of hidden files if you don't clean them up. You can also just do it from the root directory and clean up the whole thing, but yeah, anyway. So in here we're going to create our character data file or asset. So what do we call it? S character data. I'll call this DA character 1. And you can see here that's all we had in there. We had the data type and the material. And we don't have a data type at the moment for this, so we need to go to the asset manager, so project settings, editor project settings, and then go to asset manager. And because I moved those formation files, I'm going to update this. I could leave it, it would search all the data and all the subdirectories, but might as well be explicit where it is, save it searching. And then I'm going to add a new one. I'll just set this to always cook. Not really needed at the moment, but it saves you changing it later when you actually do want to cook it. We'll set this as character data. If you remember, we put that metadata saying only allow character data to be selected, so that's the name we want. And this is our base class, so that S character data. and then our directory, add a directory, and it was data characters. And now in here we should be able to choose character data, and we should be able to our overlay material. When we press play, and we place one of our characters and select them, it totally bugs out, and that's because we haven't assigned the data to the character. Always forget that step. Where's my character? So would we call it was under data? Here it is. So we can only assign this one asset. There's no formations and whatever data assets are in our game. And then save that. Let's try this again. Bam, we are in business. Please don't forget to like if you found this tutorial helpful, and subscribe so you don't miss out on future tutorials. You can join me on Discord or sign up to my Patreon where you can get access to all my tutorials early and the project files, as well as gain access to behind the scenes on my current game development. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you next time.